And, having spoken yesterday about how sentient beings are like a bucket in the well, when you visualize the sentient beings around you, think about that, how they go up and down, how they're bound by the rope, and what's happening is controlled by the operator of ignorance and view of a personal identity. Think about it. Don't just see sentient beings as, okay, there's John and Susan and what else is new. See them as actually sentient beings in samsara. Don't see them as your friends or your colleagues or like that. They're sentient beings in samsara, and we're all alike. Doesn't matter our personalities or where we live or anything like that. These 6 similes of how sentient beings are like a bucket in a well, it pertains to all of us. Yeah. So it's training our mind to see living beings in a different way. Because we usually, when we look at people, oh, this one's a friend, this one's an enemy, this one's a stranger, this one's tall and good looking, this one's short and good looking, that one's fat and good looking, that one's thin and good looking, and then all of our opinions and judgments. I confided one in you yesterday. I'm waiting for a few of these guys to show up at the door and say, oh, we heard you talking about us at your teaching. No, I'm joking. But, we're so used to seeing sentient beings in that light. But try practice thinking, this is somebody trapped in samsara because of their afflictions and karma. This is somebody who can't see reality, just like me, who can't see reality because of ignorance. This is somebody who's going to die and be reborn and go up and down in samsara from one migration to the next. Okay? So, train your mind to see people like that. And then compassion arises, quite easily. Whereas if you just use your regular old way of seeing people, then it's so easy to go into attachment, aversion, and apathy. Okay? So let's cultivate our motivation. When we usually think of ourselves, we think of all of our conventional identities. I am this nationality, this gender, this race, this socioeconomic group, this educational level. I have this career and these hobbies and these friends and, all these different identities that we think this is who we are, this is I am. Actually, all those identities are only conditioned things from this life. And when this life is over, those identities are gone. And when there's ignorance in our mind stream and the seeds of ignorance there, then at the end of this life, we will be reborn in another realm inside samsara. This cycle of constantly recurring difficulties. And when we think of ourselves in that way, then all the conventional identities of this life fade away, they slip away, they don't make any sense. Because basically we're a being whose mind is limited by afflictions, someone who sees the world through the lens of ignorance, generates attachment, aversion, and other disturbing emotions and wrong views. And then acts motivated by those different kinds of thoughts, creating karma, actions that leave seeds or imprints on our mind stream. And then later, when those seeds and imprints meet cooperative conditions, then they ripen into our experience. So that, from a bigger viewpoint, is actually who we are. A sentient being going up and down through different rebirths in samsara, wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer, not knowing what the cause of happiness is, and so just following whatever thought or impulse arises in our mind without really considering what will be the results of my actions for myself and also on others. So we get reborn, we create more karma, at the same time we're experiencing the result of previous actions from previous lives. And the cycle continues without any end unless we encounter the Buddha's teachings or any teachings that can accurately explain the path to awakening. And not just encounter them, but to learn them, reflect on them, meditate on them, put them into practice in our daily lives. So take a moment and think that this is really what you're about. It's not your conventional identities of this life. And then when you reflect on other people that you know or other living beings that you have an image of who they are, what their place in society is, what their good qualities are, their bad qualities, so on and so forth. Drop all of that and just see them as living beings under the influence of afflictions, pushed along by ignorance and view of the personal identity, acting in various ways, and the seeds of those actions on the mind stream then ripening in various experiences in this life and in future lives. These people dying and being reborn again and again and again. And then think that we have the fortune, at least in this life, to have met the Dharma. We have the opportunity to listen to it, to practice it, to improve our mind and develop our capabilities, our wisdom, compassion, power, skill, and so forth. And so let's engage in this practice, not only for our own benefit, but since everybody else is exactly like us. In addition, they've been kind to us. Let's practice the path so we can move towards full awakening, so that while we're on the path and after we've attained full awakening, we can act most effectively without limitations from our side to benefit other living beings. And let's make that the goal of our life. Does that change how you view yourself and how you view other people? Yeah. Does it change how you view the people that you're very close to, who you're very attached to? Yeah. And what about the people that you don't like? Everybody's kind of equal, aren't they? Yeah. So it's very good for reducing attachment and aversion and apathy. And it's really much more realistic, because if we see sentient beings as struggling sentient beings in cyclic existence, we're not going to have expectations that they're going to bring us ultimate happiness. And we're not going to get so upset when they do stupid things, because we know that anybody who's like us, overwhelmed by afflictions and karma, is going to do stupid things. Yeah. So it makes our perspective so much bigger and makes our mind much more tolerant and, without so many demands and expectations and opinions. So it really makes it much easier to have empathy and compassion. Can you see that, how that works? Okay, so this is a very good way to train the mind to practice seeing living beings. And initially, your mind might have some resistance. Wait, that person's very dear and precious to me. I don't want to see them as being just like everybody else, overwhelmed by afflictions and karma, going up and down in the six realms, sometimes being born as a grasshopper, sometimes as a god, sometimes in the hungry ghost realm. I don't want to see these people like this. I want to see them the way I see them now. They are my mother, father, brother, sister, daughter, son, friend, lover. They're what I see them as now. And our mind makes some fuss, So what that's about is you can see at that time very clearly how we're grasping impermanent things to be permanent. Here are these living beings who are impermanent. Even in this life, they aren't the same thing that we're grasping onto them being right now. Yeah? Oh, they're so wonderful. They do this and that and that. Well, when they were a baby, all they did was cry and poop and eat. Even in this life, they haven't been so wonderful. Yeah? They haven't been so attractive. They haven't been so in love with us. You know? So in love with us that makes us want to be in love with them. Yeah? So even this life, they've changed. So look at how our mind fights reality. You know, the reality is that people change moment by moment, and from the beginning of their life to the end of their life. And we expect them always to be the same as our opinion of them, our conception of them. Yeah, that is our problem, our misconception. Okay. And similarly, it shows how we grasp our resistance, shows how we grasp at inherent existence. This person is really that. They're a real enemy. I'm sure in all my previous lives, they were my enemy. And this one was my, dearest family member in all my lifetimes. I'm sure of it. Yeah. They're always like that. And in the next life, when I see them, we will recognize each other and we will love each other again, or we will hate each other again, because we have fixed personalities. Yeah. Again, this is our fantasy, totally our misconception. When we die and we're reborn in a totally different life, with a different body, different mental aggregates. There's a continuity from this life, and the karma comes with us, the habits come with us. But we're born as a very different person. Yeah? Because if you look at it this way, all of us knew each other in previous lives. Yeah, we've all been around hanging out in Samsara for some time. So we've been each other's lovers and friends and mothers and fathers and everything else many times in Samsara. When we met in this lifetime, did you recognize anybody in this room from your previous lifetime? Yeah? Did you go, oh, hi, I remember you. 15 eons ago, we were married. And you were my child 14 and a half eons ago. Yeah? Of course, we didn't recognize each other, who we were in previous lives, did we? Oh, you were my pet dog. So there's a story in the scriptures about an arhat who was going on Pindapat, alms round. So he's a monk and goes door to door to collect alms. And he looked in one house that he had gone by, and there was a mother sitting with a baby. No, the father was sitting with the baby on his lap and just adoring his baby child. And the mother was feeding fish or meat or something, meat scraps, to the dog. Okay, so looks like normal setting, okay? This was ancient time. They were feeding meat scraps. Now they feed, what is it, Purina dog chow or, something. Yeah, you feed that to your dogs. So the Arhat had psychic powers, and he could see who all these people were in their previous life. So this very normal looking scene, he looked at and he went, oh my goodness, this is really what samsara is about. The child that the husband was holding on his lap and adoring so much was his wife's lover. Okay? The dog who the wife was feeding the scraps to was her mother. Okay? And I forget what the husband and wife were to each other. You know, maybe business partners in a previous life or something, who knows. But you know, in this life, totally different roles. And especially, you know, the Arhat was going, oh my goodness, if this father knew that he was coddling his wife's lover, you know, and if the mother knew that she were feeding the bones, that they were feeding the dog, you know, if she realized that the dog is her mother, and I think the bones might have been the bones of her father, yeah, and if she realized that, and if the dog realized that it was eating the bones of, gnawing on the bones of previous life husband, yeah. So this is what samsara is about. So thinking like this helps us really familiarize our mind with a much more realistic view of samsara. Okay? And it, like I said before, it also opens our mind to be so much more tolerant and fewer unrealistic expectations on other people, and much more forgiving. Okay? So keep meditating on this, the way that sentient beings are like a bucket in the well. And if it makes your mind sober, you know, that's good. Say, now I know why I have to get out of samsara. Now I know why they say there's no ultimate happiness in samsara. Now I'm actually seeing that, you know. If your mind becomes sober and it really like jars you, you know, then you're getting somewhere in your practice. Okay? So don't get depressed about it. You know, oh, I'm so depressed. Now I realize there's no happiness in samsara. Actually, before you realized it, there was still no happiness, ultimate happiness in samsara, except you believed there was. And that belief lie behind your going round and round in samsara from beginningless time and getting frustrated and getting unhappy. So now when you finally see things as they really are, it's your opportunity to do something about the situation and clean up your act and get out of this merry-go-round. Okay, instead of, you know, living in the happy, what is it? Ignorance is bliss. I think samsara is wonderful. You know, until every day something happens that we don't like and we get upset. You know? Okay, so there were a couple of questions. Yeah. And I have to say, I appreciate Venerable Samten's introduction because I'm still reviewing the last chapter we did last year. So we'll see. Okay, so there's one question from yesterday. What is the Buddhist view of the difference between empathy and compassion? So empathy comes before compassion. Okay? Empathy is understanding how somebody feels. Okay? You understand what they're feeling, why they're feeling that way. Okay? Compassion wants them to be free of misery and the causes of misery. So to generate compassion, you have to have some empathy. You have to understand how people feel. And then compassion takes it the next step and wants to free them from their misery. And love wants to give them happiness and its causes. Okay? Then the next question, okay, this one's a bit long. I've been conditioned by an abusive relationship to think that my needs are unreasonable or crazy or something like that. I'm 1 year out now, but still working on it. How do I determine which of my needs and feelings are reasonable and which are unreasonable? I don't want to go to the other extreme of thinking that all my possible needs are reasonable or that they're all unreasonable. What's the middle? And I also struggle with doubting whether my needs are reasonable or not. And that causes me to fall into a cycle, you know. Are my needs reasonable? Are they unreasonable? Okay. So, similar to the question yesterday, I have no ability, because I don't know the person who's asking it. And even if I did, to tell you whether your needs are reasonable or unreasonable. You're asking for tools how to see that. You know, so you can tell for yourself. Let me instead just speak a little bit more in general about needs, okay, rather than to give you a specific method. Yes, we have emotional needs. Yeah, as living samsaric beings, we have emotional needs. So we can acknowledge that. Yeah. What happens, the difficulty, especially in relationships, is when we come to expect that other people will always meet those needs. And especially now, present society, where we accentuate romantic relationships so that they're much higher and more important than other relationships in our life, then we tend, entering into romantic relationships, to have so many expectations that one person is going to meet all of our needs. In older societies, or a few hundred years ago, people were more embedded within a family structure. So you lived with your parents and siblings, and then you had kids, and they were there, and cousins. And so your different needs were met by different people because there was a wide variety of people that you were close to, that you interacted with in a regular way. But now, with everybody wanting to have their own home, you know, and this thing in the media of just valorizing romantic relationships, you know, in previous centuries, and still now in some cultures, you know, marriage is not a romantic thing. It's a joining of two families. And the parents make the decisions about who their kids are going to get, who their kids will marry. And you just hope that your parents, you know, could pick somebody that you get along with. Yeah. But you didn't enter into marriage with this thing of, oh, they're so wonderful. They're going to meet all my needs. I finally found the one and only, and there is no one else like this person in my life, and there will never be anybody like this person in my life, and they will meet all my needs. And of course, we don't say that, but that's going on. Okay? Now, let's flip it. If somebody who you're attracted to comes to you and says, I really care about you and I'm attracted to you, and I expect you to meet all of my needs. I expect you when I'm depressed to cheer me up, when somebody criticizes me to stand with me against that other person, when I'm happy to be happy and joyous with me, when I'm serious to be serious and have a deep discussion with me. I expect you to meet all of my needs and always be there for me. If somebody said that to you, what would you reply?
I've got an appointment.
Sorry, I've got to go somewhere. Bye, see you later. Good luck. It's like, wait a minute, I can't do that. Yeah. How can I meet all of somebody else's needs? Yeah, that's totally impossible. Yeah. So see how we would react if somebody said that to us, and then realize, if we have that expectation of others, that's essentially what we're saying to them. And that's going to create a lot of tension in the relationship. Yeah, because whether our needs are reasonable or unreasonable doesn't matter. Just the fact that we're putting so much on somebody else is going to make them a little bit nuts. Okay? Then actually reasonable and unreasonable needs, there's no external standard for that. I think it depends very much on the people. One of my friends told me that when she was married to one man, and one of the areas of disagreement was that she really liked to know where he was during the day and what he was doing. And he didn't want to communicate during the day because he was busy doing all of his stuff. So she felt, neglected and forgotten, even though she was actually very busy with her own career, but she just liked to, check in. And he felt put upon, and it was a major source of conflict. He died because he was quite a bit older than her, and he died first. And then she was with somebody else, and she said, he and I get along so well because he always likes to know where I am during the day too. So we just go back and forth, and we both meet each other's needs for touching with each other during the day. So, was her need to touch in with her partner reasonable or unreasonable? We can't say. In one relationship, it didn't work. In another relationship, it was great. It brought them closer. Okay? So that's one thing about needs. Another thing about needs is our needs belong to us. Okay? And fulfilling those needs is something that we too can do. We don't need to depend on other people to fulfill our needs. Okay. And one of the areas that I think I know for myself where I really needed to grow up was learning to work with my own emotional needs instead of expecting other people to meet those needs. And so learning to be my own friend, learning to enjoy being alone and enjoying my own company, reading or taking a walk or doing something I like. Yeah. Learning when I feel a little bit down, how to encourage my mind and see the bright sides of my life and to see the good things going for me. Yeah. Learning when I feel lonely that actually loneliness is only a feeling in the mind. It's not an external situation. And if I open up and communicate with more people, then I solve my own loneliness. Yeah. Or even if I play with the cat, that takes care of my loneliness. So there's so many different ways that we can do things to try and meet our own needs. Yeah. And then, of course, as we mature and grow up, we may begin to see that some of those needs are no longer our needs. Yeah. And we begin to see that some of those needs actually were a little bit over the top. Just a little bit. And you start looking back at the way you used to act when your needs weren't met. Oh, I can see there's a story there.
One of my biggest needs was freedom, autonomy, being able to come and go as I please. And because of that need, if it didn't get met within 30 seconds of anybody, I just took off and headed over exit stage left. But when I moved to the Abbey, I think it was the hardest need for me to take care of because I misunderstood what freedom and autonomy were. It was that my afflictions could do whatever they wanted and I would follow them on any impulse. That's what I saw as freedom. To be able to do what I wanted was to be able to follow my attachment, my greed, my craving, my aversion. And so for the first few years here, I just think about running down the road every once in a while when those afflictions were not being able to play themselves out in the form of being able to do whatever I wanted. It took a while. I think it was, as Venerable said, I grew up about it. And I realized that that was a huge part of my misery making, and that to be able to have a life that had meaning and purpose, where I would actually train myself to learn, is this helpful or not, opened up my life to a kind of freedom that I never even knew existed. The mind was a lot less afflicted. It had a little bit of space to make some decisions. And I was able to grow closer to people despite difficulties that we might have. So I totally reinterpreted what freedom was as a result of that.
Mm. Okay. So that's a very good example. Thank you for sharing, how we come to see sometimes that our needs are really, they're not working in our benefit and they aren't very reasonable. And that when we give them up, we're actually a lot happier. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I hope I answered that question okay. Okay, so we'll continue on. We're on page 203. We've done 2 pages. Okay, so we finished yesterday the bucket example, so we'll continue reading about halfway down the page. Through this simile, Chandrakirti provides insight into the details of the process driving cyclic existence, or samsara. First, apply this information about cyclic existence to yourself so that you can understand your own plight and develop a strong intention to transcend this dynamic of recurring problems. Okay? So you look at your own self first. If your mind has not been affected by thinking about the way you yourself wander in an uncontrolled cycle of self-ruin, that's, yeah. Okay, you don't realize that you yourself wander in an uncontrolled cycle of self-ruin. Then, when you reflect on the process of suffering in other sentient beings, you will not find their suffering so unbearable that you would feel the need to help extricate them from this morass. Okay? So we have to see the depth of our own unsatisfactory conditions in samsara and how we're constantly shooting ourselves in the foot by acting out our own afflictions. And that is a necessary step before we can generate compassion for other living beings. Because if, we can't see it in ourselves, how can we see it in others? Okay, so here's the meditative reflection. Okay, so you can, you've kind of done some of this before, but you can do it again. Okay, so consider, 1, just as a bucket in a well is bound by a rope, so I am constrained by counterproductive emotions and actions driven by them. So make examples in your life about that. 2, just as the movement of a bucket up and down the well is run by an operator, so the process of my cyclic existence is run by my untamed mind. Realize it doesn't say by stupid government policies. It doesn't say by other people's racism and sexism. It doesn't say because I'm the victim of other people picking on me. Okay? The process of my cyclic existence is run by my untamed mind. So we're not negating what other people say or do, but how we respond to it is our choice, if we take that choice. If we don't take that choice and just go on with our old habits, we will get the same old results. Okay, so the process of my cyclic existence is run by my untamed mind, specifically through mistakenly believing that I inherently exist and that mine inherently exists. So we talked about that yesterday. Yeah. 3, just as a bucket travels up and down the well over and over, so I ceaselessly wander in the great well of cyclic existence, from the uppermost states of temporary happiness to the lower states of temporary pain. So that's my existence. Yeah, my existence is not about climbing up the corporate ladder. It's not about creating a legacy after I die. This is what happens in samsara. So 4, just as it takes great exertion to draw the bucket up, but it descends easily, so I have to expend great effort to draw myself upward to a happier life, but easily descend to painful situations. So here the question's going to arise, what's the first step I need to do to draw myself upward to a happier life and stop creating the cause to descend to painful situations? What's the first thing that I need to do that's going to be effective? Yep, clean up our act. Clean up our act is modern language for keep good ethical conduct. Okay. Another way of saying keep good ethical conduct is stop being a jerk. Okay. Because when we don't keep good ethical conduct, we act like jerks, not only in other people's eyes, although sometimes people praise us for our bad ethical conduct because they're just as confused as we are. But our own bad ethical conduct, who experiences the karmic result of it? I do. So I'm shooting myself in the foot. Yeah? When I hurt others, I hurt myself. Yeah? And we have to remember that. Yeah? And here I'm not saying that every time someone else is hurt by our actions, that we're hurting ourselves. Because sometimes we act with a good intention. The other person misunderstands, or because of the other person's own afflictions, they're unhappy. But we acted with a good intention. What I'm talking about is when we have a rotten intention that wants to harm somebody or use them or get something out of them. Okay? And when we do that, when we harm others in that way, we are also harming ourselves. Okay, and so that means to slow down and think about our actions. And the Buddha was very kind in delineating 10 actions that we readily get involved in that create messes in our lives. Okay? Now, some of these 10, I'll go through them. Some of these 10 are approved by society, okay? Or by small groups of people within society. But just because society thinks it's good, just because your friends think that a certain action is good, does not mean that it's virtuous, does not mean you're creating good karma doing it. Okay, so we have to think, the Buddha's presenting these 10 for us to think about. The way we think about them is not the Buddha set down 10 commandments. Thou shalt not do this and that, otherwise you are going to hell. No. Don't impose your Christian upbringing on Buddhism. This is not what's going on in Buddhism. The Buddha observed, because the Buddha didn't make up the rules. He didn't make up the rules. He just described the natural process of what kind of actions and motivations led to what kind of results. And what kind of results originated in what kind of actions and motivations. He just described that, and he could see how that happened from one lifetime to another, because his mind was so purified, and so these things automatically appeared to him. So whenever he saw sentient beings suffering, he said the actions that caused that suffering is called non-virtuous or negative or unwholesome, whatever term you want to use. So the Buddha did not make this up. An action is not inherently bad or evil. It becomes non-virtuous because of the effect it has. Okay. Similarly, some actions are considered virtuous, and it's not because they inherently are. It's because they produce a result of happiness. And so they're called virtuous. Okay? So here are the things the Buddha said. Check up in your own experience. Yeah. What happens when you engage in these 10 actions? And what happens when you engage in the opposite? So ideally, the way to do this is if we had psychic powers and could see the future life's ramifications of these actions. But we don't have those powers. So what we can do is we can see, when I do certain actions, what's the result in this life? And to think, when I do certain actions, how would I feel if those actions were done to me in a future life, or, if they caused the rebirth that I was going to take? Okay? So first one is taking life. Yeah. Now somebody say, "Oh, but I feel so good when I squash those, yeah, what is it? Cockroaches." Yeah, right. Don't you feel good squashing those cockroaches? Yeah. I had to catch the cockroach, but she did the big spiders. Okay. But, we say, "Oh, I felt so good. I smashed that spider." Because India, we had spiders in a room like this. So, yeah, or cockroaches. In Singapore, we had cockroaches like this, America, tiny cockroaches. In the South, you have big ones? Do they fly? Yeah. The ones in Hong Kong where I lived flew. And I lived in a flat, must have been, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 stories up. And if you didn't have a screen on your window, sometimes the cockroaches would fly into your flat. Yeah, big ones, Okay. So, okay, so you might temporarily say, "Oh, I'm so glad I killed them." Yeah. But do you really feel good about killing them? And what about taking human life? Yeah. Somebody say, "Well, I killed that terrorist. I'm so glad." But when that person's alone later on, yeah, if you talk to veterans, yeah, when veterans really open up about their war experiences, even though the military told them that what they were doing was saving the country, they don't feel good about it. Yeah. Okay, so killing. Taking what is not freely given. We say stealing, but stealing, we usually think of breaking into somebody's house. Yeah. Or, hot wiring their car. I don't know, can you hot wire cars now? There's so many different ways of starting them. Anyway, yeah, taking what somebody else hasn't given us and claiming it as our own. Yeah, we may initially say, "Oh, good, I got that." Yeah. They sent me 2 stimulus checks by accident. I get to keep both of them. Well, okay. So, taking things that aren't really ours. Third one, unwise and unkind sexual behavior. Okay. So this means sexual relationships where you could spread disease. It means using other living beings, seeing them as objects and using them for our own pleasure. Okay. Any kind of sexual abuse of children, of adults, whatever. Okay. So you may say, "Oh, but it was so much fun." But do you really feel good about it? And what about the effect on other people? How was that? Okay. Fourth one, lying, not telling the truth. Yeah. There was this great video. Who was it? You sent it around, called The Lion King. Lyin apostrophe King. Okay. I won't tell you who it's about. You can look it up. But what happens when somebody lies all the time? Yeah. Look at the situation this country's in right now, and you see it. Okay? Look at how little faith people have in the people who have power. A lot because of lying and stealing. Yeah. Of course, they don't call it lying and stealing. It's alternate truths and corruption, or perks. Perks, that's what it is. It's not stealing, it's perks. Yeah. Your Secretary of State, Pompeo, you can have government employees do your own chores for you. Yeah. You can have people fired at your will because they're investigating you, and then make up excuses. Netanyahu, I don't know what in the world Bibi's doing, but same kind of thing. No wonder they're such good friends. You know, what happens when people cannot tell the truth? Yeah. And I think the lying one is kind of double trouble. There's the initial thing you did that you don't want anybody to know about because it was not so good. And then there's the lying to cover it up. So you have two things going on. And sometimes what people get more upset about is not the initial thing, but the lying. Okay? The fact that somebody lies and denies what they did is often more upsetting than the actual action that they did. So check up on when we have altered the truth or had, alternative facts. I love that. Kelly Ann is so creative. Whoever would have thought of the term alternate facts? I never would have thought of that. She was so creative. Too bad she didn't use it in another way, her creativity. Okay, so that's the first five. The first four. Then there is divisive speech. So using our speech to create disharmony. Yeah, talking behind people's back to turn a certain group against other people. So this creates factions in families, factions in the office, everywhere, You badmouth other people to get them to side with you, or I badmouth these people to get these people to side with me, okay? This is what they do in the military to convince the soldiers that it's okay to kill, yeah, because the enemy is not human. Okay, then that's 5. 6 is harsh words. So getting angry, insulting, telling people off, criticizing them, blaming them, any kind of speech that, is painful to others and wants to hurt them in some way or another, or to get what we want. Then the 7th one is idle talk. So just blah, blah about nothing. Okay, this is what people spend a lot of time doing. So, we have to chit-chat with everybody. We don't have serious discussions with everybody. But the amount of time we spend chit-chatting and what we spend chit-chatting about, to be careful about that. And then, so we had the first 3 were physical, next 4 were verbal, then the last 3 are mental. So the first one is coveting other people's stuff. Okay, this is what is called in America being a good citizen and helping the economy. Except, because we covet everything in the department stores. Although I did hear one Lama say that that's not strictly coveting because the people who own those things want you to covet their stuff and come and buy it. Okay. Then the 9th is malice, planning our revenge, how we're going to get even or hurt somebody. And the 10th one is distorted views. not seeing important spiritual topics correctly, like saying sentient beings are inherently defiled. There's no way to purify the mind. There's no way to get out of suffering because we are biological beings and are hardwired to be selfish and self-centered. So that's it. Forget about anything spiritual. It's not going to happen. Okay, so it's, I know many of you have heard this list of 10 before. It's always good to hear it again and to think about it again and to make examples from our own life about it again. And it really helps us, again, to develop our own wisdom. And yesterday the question came up about being mindful or having introspective awareness about what we're saying and thinking and doing and feeling. This is where that comes in, doing a life reflection and like, what's going on in my mind when I do certain actions? Yeah, what's motivating me? And am I looking at the effects of my actions on other people and on myself, or am I just operating on automatic? And what is important to me in my life, and how do I want to live my life? And how can I slowly break the bad habits and nudge myself so that I can live in accordance with my values? Yeah, so this kind of contemplation is so essential to do again and again and again, not just to do it and think, okay, I got that settled. Now I know I don't do any negative actions. Well, a couple of things, I get mad at these people, but all the rest are pretty good. And so I'm on my way to awakening. And this is how scandals happen. Yeah. This is the source of scandals in spiritual communities. When somebody thinks, I've mastered ethical conduct and I'm doing well. So there comes a sense of complacency, of arrogance, and then heedlessness follows, and we don't look at our own actions because we think, well, I've done that. That's beginning stuff. Ethical conduct is for beginners. That's what they taught us in Sunday school. I'm not in Sunday school anymore. I don't need to think about that stuff. Yeah, and that arrogance is what leads to downfalls and then scandals. I'm above the law. The rules don't apply to me. As long as I don't get caught, and I will make sure I don't get caught, then there's nothing wrong with it. Everybody else does this. Why can't I? It's only a little white lie. It's only a little thing that I'm taking. This is not a very big negativity. Anyway, it won't harm the other people. They won't miss it. Do you see, do you have these kinds of thoughts kind of floating around in your mind sometime? Yeah? So this is how we start sliding down the slippery slope. Okay. So that was a commentary on one of the 6 points. Where was I? Okay, it was point 4. Okay, yeah, how it takes great exertion to draw the bucket up, but it descends so easily. Okay, so then 5. Just as a bucket does not determine its own movements, so the factors involved in shaping my life are the results of past ignorance, attachment, and grasping. Okay, so I may be born in a certain situation that's better than others or worse than others. Yeah, it's because of my actions in a previous life. Okay. In the present, these same factors are continually creating more problems for my future lives, like waves in the ocean. Okay. So previous life, anger came up. And then this lifetime, similar, anger comes up, or attachment or jealousy, whatever is the thing that is strongest in you. And just keeps conditioning us. 6, just as a bucket bumps against the walls of the well when it ascends and descends, so I am battered day by day by the suffering of pain and change, and by being caught in processes beyond my control. So this one, I didn't explain it yesterday, but this one is talking about the 3 kinds of dukkha. Dukkha meaning unsatisfactory conditions in samsara. So there's the dukkha of pain. So this is when we experience mental or physical pain. And every living being in every realm doesn't like it and recognizes this as undesirable. Then the second one is the dukkha of change. And that's what we call worldly happiness. So this one is much more difficult to see. What it means is that all the things that we do that we say bring me happiness, either they don't last very long, they change and they don't last, and we separate from them. Or if we keep doing them again and again and again and again without sufficient intervals between them, then what once brought us delight now brings us misery. So the actual external thing that made us happy does not have happiness in it. It only brings us happiness when we're suffering from the lack of it. When we have enough of it already and we get more, it actually brings suffering. Okay, the easy example is food. Okay, when we're hungry, we eat. It seems to us that the food has happiness and bliss inside. Okay, if that were so, then the more we ate, the happier we should be. So that happens for a short time. And then what happens if you keep eating? Okay. So, when they have these contests about how many people can eat hot dogs and things like that, at the end of the contest, do you think those people feel well? They probably go over and barf somewhere. Okay? It's such a stupid contest, isn't it? It doesn't help the people doing it, and the food could be given to a food pantry to help people who don't have food. It's such a stupid thing. Excuse my judgmental mind. Okay, but really, if you're thinking about the welfare of yourself or others, don't do that. Okay, so the food doesn't have the happiness in it, because if it did, the more we ate, the happier we should be. Okay, now take something else you do for happiness. Food, we all do. We all have individual things, okay? Yeah. So take a relationship. Take your job. You just got promoted to a new position. Yeah. And you're all excited you get to do this work. But then what would happen if you were doing that work not just 8 hours a day, but 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day, at home with your kids running around during a pandemic, in the middle of the night because something needed to be finished? Does that really always bring you joy, or does it turn into misery? The person who you think is absolutely wonderful, you never want to be separated from, you are tied to them with duct tape on your wrists, and you're with them 24/7. How long do you think that happiness is going to last? You can't even take a pee-pee break without that person. You're always with them. Is that going to bring everlasting happiness? Yeah. Okay? So what it's saying is, we're running around searching for happiness. But what we call happiness doesn't satisfy it, because if we keep doing it, it turns to misery. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the second kind of dukkha. Then the third kind of dukkha, unsatisfactory condition in samsara, is being under the control of afflictions and karma. So that's come in these 6 already. We're just controlled by afflictions and karma. We're not free beings. I think what Venerable Semkhe said was a really good example of the difference between what worldly beings consider freedom, and what the Buddha considers freedom. Because we think freedom is I can do whatever I want, when I want to do it, and nobody's going to tell me to do something or that I can't do something. I am completely free. Okay? Isn't it? And in America, we are free. So let's take our AK-47s down to the state capitol and protest because we have to wear masks. Or protest because we want to go to church and pray to God with our AK-47s or 42s or AR, whatever it is. We want to take them into church with us. It's our right. We want to be free to do this. That's what we think freedom is. Okay. That is being controlled by your afflictions. From a Buddhist viewpoint, that's not freedom. Your mind's not free. Your mind's completely controlled by afflictions. Totally under the influence of afflictions, not thinking clearly. Yeah. Actually bringing suffering to yourself by causing unnecessary fear and intimidation in other people. Yeah. By creating disharmony in society. Okay, that's not freedom. Okay, freedom from a Buddhist viewpoint is when we're free of ignorance, anger, and attachment. When we're free of those, no matter who we're with, we're happy. No matter what is going on around us, we have internal peace. Yeah. Real freedom is freedom from the afflictions. Yeah. Because then the outside circumstance is not going to disturb us. And anyone we're with, we're going to feel like we understand that person. Okay? We can be happy whatever's going on because we don't have a mental checklist that says I'm only going to be happy when I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 100,000, when 100,000 and 2. Our little checklist of everything we want to have happiness. That's not happiness. Happiness is being free of all of that. Okay, free of craving, free of grasping. Okay, so just check in your own experience what freedom is. Really check. Yeah. Whenever time you're in a situation and you don't like what's going on, you have to leave. You know how you get sometimes that energy of, I gotta walk out of here. I gotta get out of here. I can't be here one more second. Bye. Is that freedom? Yeah. Or stop this very instant. I can't take it anymore. Is that freedom? Okay. Then 7. Therefore, from the depths of my heart, I should seek to get out of this cyclic round of suffering. Okay. So we did 2 more pages. But that's our conclusion. We want to get out of the cycle of suffering. So we'll stop there. And we have time for a couple of questions, if there's questions.
Zopa Heron is asking, a young black man who knows the Dharma and stops clinging to those identities is still in danger due to racism.
Mm-hmm.
What are compassionate ways to address this situation through the Dharma?
The situation of being subject to racism. Okay. Well, first you have to notice it. You have to speak about it. Yeah. You have to discuss it. Like I was saying yesterday, accusing people and blaming people doesn't make them have goodwill towards what you're trying to do and what you're helping to make them understand. Yeah. So you have to learn to how to explain things to people in a way that they will understand. And you have to speak frankly, but speaking frankly doesn't mean it's licensed to speak harshly. Being frank is you're direct, you're straightforward, yeah. But you develop some skill because your objective is to stop the racism, okay? That makes some sense? Is that answering the question okay? Yeah. I mean, the ways we have so much discussion in our society now about things to do to stop racism. And many of those suggestions are really wonderful. And I think we have a lot to learn from those people.
Someone else is asking, does the mere keeping of precepts purify past negative karma and create virtue? Or does one need to maintain constant introspective awareness to create the virtue?
To keep the precepts, you need to have introspective awareness. Okay? So keeping the precepts and introspective awareness are not 2 different things, okay? Because you take a precept, but then you have to look at your actions and evaluate your actions and your motivations, okay? The benefits of keeping precepts is, first of all, it helps you break the bad habits because you've made a commitment in the presence of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha to avoid certain actions. And so it helps you to be more aware of your habits and your tendencies and to think about the results of things before you do them, and then to decide not to do certain things that are going to bring suffering upon yourself and others. So the introspective awareness that arises due to having precepts is very helpful. And so that by restraining from those actions, we are stopping the habit, and also we are creating virtue by restraining from those actions and also by doing the opposite of those actions, such as protecting life, protecting others' property, speaking truthfully, and so on. Okay, does that answer the question? Yeah.
Someone is asking for advice about not killing termites and ants in the context of the 10 non-virtues.
Yes, when I lived in Singapore, people are always asking me for that. And it's usually phrased in, I have to kill the termites, I have to kill the ants. And it's as if they're asking me for absolution. And I'm going to say, yes, you have to. you're excused. It's no negative karma. And I can't say that. So what to do? I'll tell you what we do here at the Abbey, okay? So a few years ago, we had a washing machine up on this floor, and we have a lower floor. Well, the washing machine started to leak one day, and the water was dripping out the lower floor. So we went in, we took everything out of that room, and then we cut open the ceiling. You remember when we cut open that ceiling? To stop the water from flowing. Well, we cut open the ceiling, and what do we find? Yeah, a huge metropolis of ants. Okay? They weren't termites. They weren't the ants that ate the wood. They were the ants that lived in the wood, right? Yeah? And we took that panel out. I remember you on top of that ladder lowering that panel, and we're looking and going. And, we take that out, and, there were ants all over the place. We took the panel outside. We cut away more things. There was rotten wood. We took as much as we could outside, okay? And then we realized that there were ant colonies in some of the wooden things outside. So we had to, what were they called? Railway ties. The railway ties. Huh? They had rotted, and there was ants galore in them. And the ants, they weren't satisfied with the railway ties anymore because they were rotting. They wanted to move to a better facility, so they opened up their, they created condos inside this building, okay? And so we just took as many outside as we possibly could, yeah? Yes, I should say. We moved them in the forest, very far away. Every year we have wasps and yellow jackets and different beings who come. We try and catch them before they build their nests. Sometimes they don't, because these guys are so creative where they build nests where you would not look until they have a whole hive there and they're flying out around you. And then Venerable Tarpo puts on the bee suit in the middle of the night because they sleep at nighttime, and goes out and with her bee suit on. We should really take a picture of you sometime. And takes out the hives and drives down the road, puts them in another forest. May they live happily ever after somewhere else. Yeah, we had ants in the cabin at the end of the garden. Yeah. Yeah, those were big ants, weren't they? Yeah, carpenter ants. Yeah, and same thing there. We just relocate. Well, we put cinnamon. We smoked it. And field chalk all around. Yeah, we caulked the entire interior. We did everything. The ants still came back until we did this practice called Sir, which is a practice of making offerings of smell to different beings, that we can't see. The Sir practice is what finally made the ants go away. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. So look online for all the ways to deal with ants and termites, and good luck. I remember when I was living in Missouri, we were talking on the phone, and I'm saying to her, oh, there's these things on the ground. They look like ants, but they have wings. And they're in the middle of the phone call, they're all, hundreds of them are coming out of the walls. That's just the moment when they decided to all hatch. And I'm on the phone with her. And what are these things coming out? And like they're all over the place. She goes, they're termites. Then I had to tell the people where I was staying, that we are cohabiting with a lot of our mother sentient beings. So there's no easy way. Do what you can. With a kind heart, not with an angry one.